general managers, whatever the case may be. But I don't remember hardly ever making a deal at the trade deadline because we always felt that our team was in place, and you bring a new player in at this stage of the game, you got to teach him the system. It's just a big adjustment unless he's been there before. And so
it's not baseball. You can't just plug in a center fielder and have him play center field the way he plays center field. He's got to fit into a scheme.
Right. And even in hockey, they have certain different things that they're doing, offensively, defensively, whatever, but it's easier, I think, to plug someone in to a hockey team. And how much different are the schemes? How much possibly can they be different?
Yeah. And even within the same team, they're going to change lines and things like that. So hockey players are pretty adaptable.
Yeah, exactly right. And so I think that for me, all the trades were basically made around the start of the new league year in March, and especially draft time was when we made most of our deals, such as when we traded Brad Johnson to the Redskins back in '99 and got a first, second, and third round pick out of that deal. Because we had Randall Cunningham coming back too, and had 2 starting quarterbacks, and made other deals over the years, and sometimes it was during training camp or close to training camp. We traded Gary Zimmerman, which was one of the deals that I hated doing, but we were kind of stuck on that deal. Future Hall of Fame tackle, and we knew how great he was, but he just wouldn't play under his contract, and his contract he hadn't even played it down under a new contract. I just negotiated right before free agency hit the next year. And so the unfortunate thing there in that story, of course, was his roommate on the road was Kirk Loudermilk, who signed for double what Gary was supposed to get.
I remember that.
And that didn't play very well for Gary. And he had 3 years. I said, Gary, just play 1 year, and then I'll adjust the contract and make you highest paid left tackle in the league. Nope, can't play, can't do that. And so traded him to Denver for, I think we got maybe a first and a second or something like that, maybe a first and a sixth, but didn't want to trade him. Right. Definitely not. But yeah, most of those deals were done draft time, start of the league year, and in training camp occasionally. And so, but not really during the season very often. So yeah, it was very interesting to see Golden Tate, see Demaryius Thomas go down Houston, a good deal for the Texans, for Deshaun Watson, get another weapon.
Yeah.
And as I said, the Quentin Dix deal, that one's kind of baffling to me.
Yeah, I don't get it. Let's go in a completely different direction here. It was really interesting after the Saints game. And, the way the NFL works, and there's so many NFL-driven shows now, there's Sports Center. The NFL is a monster. And if a player says something that doesn't ring right or true, it's going to be a headline for a week, if not for a season, right? And wide receivers are famous for saying the wrong thing. That's what they're famous for.
Sure.
So after the game, Thielen had a very rare fumble, and Diggs stopped running a route that led to a pick six. And listen, we all know Thielen. He's been consistent in every role he's had. He always presents the same face to the public. He's always very reasonable and accessible. So he jumped right up there in front of the crowd of cameras and said, hey, I screwed up. And that was exactly what I expected. Then Diggs starts heading to replace Thielen at that it's not a podium, it's a little area in the locker room where they do interviews. And he said kind of something under his breath, kind of like something kind of snarky or snide, like, oh, here, everybody come running to me. So it sounded like he was ready to unload or complain about something. And then he stood up there and he said, you know what, it's my fault, it's all on me. He handled it beautifully. So here you have the Vikings with 2 star wide receivers, both handling a difficult situation very difficultly. And I want to know if you're surprised, and I also want to know what it was like being in the same organization as Anthony Carter, Chris Carter, Randy Moss, and how much anything they said might have ever given you trouble.
Not much that they ever said gave me a lot of trouble, and I think that Chris was kind of a good politician. And diplomatic, and he could speak his mind about issues, about different things, but he wasn't going to throw teammates under the bus or throw his quarterbacks under the bus or anything like that. Randy, I was only with him for his rookie year, and that year he was pretty quiet,
and he was pretty good to deal with too.
Yeah, he was, except after the Cowboy game when he didn't want to talk to the media, and I had to go in there. I said, Randy, these are the guys that are going to vote for Rookie of the Year and All Pro. You might want to just say something about it was nice to kind of have a good game against the Cowboys or whatever, And so, but it and Jake Reed, a great guy. No, never a problem there, definitely.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not surprised at Adam how he handled it and that he would own the mistake and it's just and really it's kind of hard because he didn't see the guy coming,
right?
Obviously,
I don't really. I'm not blaming him.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it was a negative play that that
huge play in the game. It turned the whole game around.
But if you're going to catch 150 or 160 passes, you're gonna fumble a couple times.
Yeah,
it's
going
to happen.
Yeah, it is going to happen if you can't see the guy coming and he didn't. Yeah, you could say, hey, you can protect the ball, and I'm sure he will next time. As soon as he catches the ball, I'm sure he's going to cover up. But he never saw him coming, and the guy put the hat right on the elbow on the ball.
Yeah, I viewed it more as a good defensive play than anything else.
And for Stefan, I think that shows maturity on his part that he would protect his quarterback in that situation and say, I stopped my route. It's on me, and because it looked like on the sidelines they were kind of having a little debate about it,
right?
And so that he thought, I'm going to stop and I'm going to go back the other way or whatever. And Kirk, not so much.
Yeah, well, I think, and Stefan, he explained it. He said, my quarterback was under duress. I thought I'm going to stop here and give him an easy out.
Right.
And of course, Cousins was like, keep running the route. But so they did have a different view on the field of what they should do. But saying the wrong thing can really damage a team, and neither of the guys did that.
No, that's right, and that's a good thing. And I also thought it was interesting reading Michael Rand's piece this morning, and he made reference to the national columnist, I think it was Freeman or somebody, that is questioning Cousins and saying, is he worth the money? Is he worth the $84 million guaranteed? And he didn't think he was, and this and that, and which I think is ridiculous at this point in the season. The guy. What else could he do? I mean, he could maybe not fumble the ball as much, but the offensive line has been a turnstile, and it's been tough, and he's under pressure. As Michael Rand wrote today, he's been under pressure the second most of any quarterback in the NFL, right. And so it's not easy. For the production that he's had has been great. Yeah, they're 4-3-1, and last year they had a much better record. Well, the defense was playing better last year. They ran the ball better last year. And there are a lot of
easier
things.
Schedule.
Easier schedule. A lot of things enter into that. So I definitely agreed that you can't say at this point that deal is not worth it. No. And he's got a new offensive coordinator.
Right.
I mean, it's a whole new system for him. And so where would they be without Kirk Cousins is the question.
I agree. And Mike Freeman's a friend of mine, and I really like him as a writer. And he's not, to me, when you're in these columnist type roles like Michael is, like I am, part of the job is having the guts to put what you really think out there.
Yeah, you got to stir it up a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I don't even use the phrase stir it up. If you are honest,
right,
a lot of people are going to view you as stirring it up. Honesty is the most controversial thing in the world.
Sure.
So I appreciate Michael's willingness to tell us what he really thinks. I just happen to disagree with him on this one. I think Cousins has been excellent. I think he has been excellent under duress. About the only thing he can really pick on in his game to me is fumbling. But God bless, everybody's got a flaw someplace, right?
Right. And passes knocked down the line of scrimmage. Well, part of that is the 3-step drop that they're doing all the time
to avoid the pressure.
Exactly.
Right, So I think Cousins has been fantastic. I've been all in on him. I just happen to disagree with Mike on this one.
Yeah, and that's the way I felt about it too. Absolutely.
Let me ask you kind of a slightly different question. Anthony Carter. Anthony, sometimes could look like he was displeased on the field. Sometimes he seemed like he was moody in the locker room. But I know from talking to Fred Zamberletti back in those days, Fred would defend him, say, hey, Anthony might look exactly like a diva sometimes, but this guy wants to win. This guy's our true competitor. What was your view of Anthony? Yeah,
I agree. I thought Anthony was a very – I liked Anthony a lot personally. I thought he was a very down-to-earth guy and very talented player, definitely. And, I think that he was maybe a little guarded with the media. I think that was kind of his MO, his persona. But I think that he was a really good team guy, and so I never had any qualms about his whatever he said or whatever personality-wise. I thought he was very much on board and a great team guy, as I said. So I think that I can't ever put him in the category of an Odell Beckham or an Antonio Brown or that type of player, that the diva wide receiver out there that it's me, and no, AC was not that guy, And I think he was a very underrated guy too, even though he had good production and was a Pro Bowl player. But I think people sometimes overlooked him because they didn't think he was that fast. Well, I'll tell you what, when the ball was in the air, and he may have only run a 4.5 or 4 whatever, but when that ball was in the air, I've never seen anybody faster to go get the ball or running that slant. I mean, he just had great instincts as a football player.
Absolutely. To blend real world stuff with the NFL, so many NFL franchises, they form a personality, and sometimes that's for good, sometimes it's not. But the Steelers have always been viewed as a very classy organization through the years, a very stable organization, and I think they exhibited that again this week.
Yeah, definitely, Jim, and I'm glad you brought that up because I've always been a big fan of the Rooneys and the Rooney family, and during my time as an NFL exec, I got to know Dan Rooney very well and Art Rooney II, who's the current president of the team once his dad passed away. And they are really the class act of the NFL. I think that they are the best example of ownership around, and in terms of knowing how to run a franchise, but letting your people do the job. What other franchise in pro sports has ever had just 3 coaches in 49 years, as the Steelers have had with Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, and Mike Tomlin now? But what they did this week, and I write a weekly piece for the WCCO radio website, and I wrote about that. And I wrote about that for my Sporting News column this week, too, my sportingnews.com column about the Steelers organization. And I was certainly not surprised when 2 buses full of Steeler players, coaches, execs, and staff show up at the funeral for it was the 2 brothers that passed away in the horrendous shooting in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and the Rosenthals, and their sister had been community relations director for the team at one point, a former one, and so they came as a group, which they do as a group oftentimes, but I think what separates the Steelers in situations like that, first of all, they are so ingrained in the Pittsburgh community, and I think, whereas a lot of organizations in sports are trying to get the positive PR out of doing something like that, and this will look good, this will be good optics. They don't care about that. I think that their thing is we want to do what's right, and what makes sense, and what we can do to support people, and in this case, support the victims and their families. And they did a nice thing before the game on Sunday, before they played the Browns. They had a moment of silence. They had the scoreboard turned to black, and again, to honor the victims in this situation. And I think a couple other things that happened that were interesting. And I think Cam Hayward wore a T-shirt that had the Steeler logo and the Star of David on it, mm-hmm. and it said "Stronger than hate." And I think those things are, to me, what makes the Steelers organization special, because it starts at the top with the Rooneys, and they are so involved in so many community activities there, and have been forever. And I think that was Art Rooney, the first, the founder of the franchise, set the table for that. That they're all good. They're going to be all for Pittsburgh, and then Dan Rooney. I think the story on Dan was he lived in the same house for 50 years, and the neighborhood changed, and he never moved, mm-hmm. because it was his area, his community. And I know Art II very well, and I think he's the same way too. And Mike Tomlin had some very poignant type quotes where he said, "I live in that community. That Squirrel Hill community is where the synagogue was," and he said that it affects all of us. And so, yeah, they did the right thing, but they did it for the right reason, and to support the people and their families. And so, yeah, I say you don't want to say you're proud of what they do or thank you for what you do, because they just do it because that's the right thing to do.
Right, absolutely. There's no easy way to transition from real life and death stuff back to sports, but let's do a couple more things here on the football front before we say goodbye for this week. Let's get a prediction and a final thought from Jeff. Let's start with your prediction for this week.
Well, I think it